Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Perlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Perlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about photographing beautiful ecosystems, landscapes, with my guest, Will Furman, president of Will Furman Photography, former president of Furman Films. He is also the photographer for the book Bodie, Good Times and Bad. He has been a photographer and director of over 80 film and TV programs and 300 television commercials. He's a musician and composer with over 40 television and film credits to his name, and he has received over 50 international film festival honors, including 7 Cine Golden Eagles. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Your photography is gorgeous. I've seen some of the areas that you have photographed in the western United States, but your pictures look so different than what I see in person. How do you capture the light, the colors, the shapes, the forms?
Yeah, I've been studying how to touch people and reach people in their soul and their heart for over 50 years. It's the same quest whether you're a musician, a singer, or a player, or a photographer, or a movie maker, or even an actor. The technique that I use in film is to, first of all, get the right composition, and then I do a lot of burning and dodging to emphasize where the eye should go, very much the way Ansel Adams did, or Carlton Watkins, or any of the historic photographers.
But yours are in color.
I started out in black and white when I was young, but because of my motion picture experience, I really liked color and bringing out the colors in a way that black and white and the tonal range brings out the depth in black and white. I searched to do that with color photography.
You have created beautiful work showing the serenity and magic of nature, and you have pioneered what you described as fotoreflections, which you call a single image technique that utilizes both the reflectivity and translucency of windows to create a single image with multiple planes. How do you do that?
Well, it's radio, but I'm going to show you with my words, or try to.
It's difficult.
Yeah, but I stumbled on this technique as a way to make things come alive. Bodie is, for those of your listeners that don't know, aren't aware of it, is probably the best preserved ghost town in the western United States. And the reason it's so is because it was never abandoned and wasn't vandalized, because it ended up being owned mostly by one man. He protected it with guards and so forth, and then he turned it over to the California State Parks in 1967.
We're talking about an area north of Mono Lake in the eastern Sierra Range, east of the big Sierra Nevada range.
Correct.
West of Death Valley. And it was a gold mine town that is at 9,000 feet. And I enjoyed reading the fact that it apparently had the highest school for the kids than any other place in the United States.
Yes. It frequently, in the old days and even to this day, the coldest temperatures in California are frequently registered there.
Apparently they only had warm days 1 month in the year.
Yeah, well, it does snow every month of the year there, and I can attest to that personally, because I've been there every month when it snowed.
The book Bodie, Good Times and Bad, the author Nicholas Clapp provided some fascinating history of the people, the life, the place, and you provided pictures of some of these old buildings. You say it was never abandoned, but there was a major fire at one point that destroyed a lot of the buildings.
Yes, took out over 100 buildings, but what remains is over 100 buildings, and at its peak, Bodie was about 8,000 people. There are many, many mines there.
What is unique about this place, too, is that even though it's near the forest, there are no trees to speak of. It's a big open plain, high desert, you might say.
It is definitely high desert. There's a lot of sagebrush there. There never were any trees there, maybe just a few odd ones here and there. Because it's east of the Sierras end up getting most of the snow, and so basically this is like Nevada and Utah, except it's very high elevation. Even though it's only 15 miles from the Sierras and 10 miles north of Bodie, it is very, very much a desert town.
The sky, though, the pictures just on the front and back of your book show gorgeous clouds and colors.
Yes. Well, as anybody who's spent much time in the Sierra Nevada mountains knows, they frequently get clouds almost every day because it being such a big mountain range. It makes its own weather, just like many large mountains do, and because these are the tallest mountains in the southern 48 states, it is quite strongly weather influenced. In one day, in any time you go to Bodie, you could have 85 degrees, and then it could all of a sudden get down to 30 degrees within a space of a couple of hours. The weather that gets sucked in by the mountains and by the San Joaquin Valley heat blows over the Sierras, but stops in clouds, and Bodie is close enough to that it gets clouds almost every day, and it's quite strong weather.
The book has your modern-day pictures, but a lot of historic pictures that were taken of the people and the place when it was a thriving town, and the description of the place and who lived there and how they lived was quite fascinating too, because basically there were a lot of men there trying to find their riches in the gold mines, and that meant that there were a lot of other kinds of activities in the city, whole blocks of saloons and places where they could frequent prostitutes, and the descriptions of the life of the people fighting each other, and apparently they were known for a lot of gun battles, but not good shots.
That's right. Because it is so remote, and if you're driving there, the road ends at Bodie, so you have to want to get there. But it's certainly worth the trip for anybody if they're driving. It's a magical place, and it really draws people in. You have the feeling that, gosh, they just left yesterday, or they went out for lunch, and they'll be back in a couple hours. You look in the windows, you'd swear that, gosh, they were just here. We just missed them.
I was surprised by how the place did look like it had just been left as though they were there the day before.
Yeah, because so many of the buildings were protected by this one man who ended up owning the bank, and he felt that Bodie would come back, and that because there was still a lot of gold there, so he held on to it because he thought it would be a thriving gold mining town again. But times changed and the methods of mining changed, and it was easier to get gold and silver than digging a hard rock mine down elevator shafts.
It wasn't exactly a safe place to go in and out of, because bandits would attack the stagecoaches and people going in and out.
Even if there wasn't any gold on the stagecoach, there were passengers, and they had watches and wallets and purses, so they would relieve them of those personal belongings.
As you mentioned, Bodie is now a state park. Has it received the necessary funding to preserve and protect the remaining buildings?
It is one of the smaller parks. They do have rangers on site that live there all year round, so it's protected, because a lot of people think, oh, we'll just go up there on, some snowy day or something, and we'll just take some of this stuff home, and put it in our study. It's quite well protected.
Naturally, when you go to a park, state, county, federal, you should leave what you find in what you see so that others can
Absolutely.
enjoy and appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, they have a Bodie Foundation, which increases the number of buildings that they can go in by restoring the roofs. They do get some funding from the state. There's a lot of demand on the resources of California these days with so many state parks. I don't know, we got over 50 state parks.
A lot of your pictures do have those reflections. How did you get them? Because you have a picture inside and the reflection from outside. So I'm looking at one, for example, that shows a lot of buildings and then also a carriage for a baby at the same time. It's a reflection.
Right. It's funny. I'll tell you how that it came about that I discovered this technique. I had photographed Bodie for over 30 years and been there over a dozen times. And I gave an assignment to myself before I went up there. A friend suggested it because I said, I've photographed everything in the town, but I love to go back there. And they said, well, why don't you see if you could photograph it in a new way? If there's a way that you could see it differently than you've ever seen it before. And so, I said, that'll be my assignment. I'm going to say I won't take a photograph that's at all like anybody else's that I've seen or that I've taken. And a storm was brewing and came in quite rapidly, and it was snow and cold and wind. And so I went inside one of the homes that's open for the tourists, and I saw the scene through a window of the church and the main street, and then I saw also at the same time a reflection in that window of the house behind me. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. So I took a picture of it, and I took a lot of different pictures, and I wasn't sure whether that would work out or not, but I showed it to some of my artist friends after I'd gotten back and printed them, and they said, that's really, really different. You've got something there.
You certainly showed some beautiful images of this unique ghost town. I'm so glad that you presented them in the book Bodie, Good Times and Bad. But when we return, I want to talk more with Will Furman about his photographic work in other locations and enjoying and presenting nature. We'll be back in a moment.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Perlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Will Furman. He is president of Will Furman Photography. You have done over 80 film and TV programs, 300 TV commercials, both as a photographer, as a director. You have been a musician and composer of over 40 television and films. You've received over 50 international awards for your work. You're combining music, photography, directing. What is the artistic process that you are incorporating in presenting nature to the public through film, through music?
I have developed this technique which happened in Bodie, and then I started working with it more strongly in subsequent trips. The technique happens this way. Photoreflections is a natural superimposition of two images. Now, how do you get that? When I say natural, I mean because it is all around everybody, all of your listeners. They can see it stop any town on any main street and get out and look through the window of any store. And you will see into that store, but if you focus your eyes, there's a reflection behind you in the glass that you're looking through. But now our brain discounts that, and it blocks it out because we're interested in what's on the other side of the window. What this is I'm capturing what's there, but my mind doesn't edit it out. These reflections are all around us on any glass. It depends on the lighting. Sometimes their piece of glass is like a mirror, and sometimes it's completely translucent and we can't see it at all. And that all depends on where the light is. This technique that I developed, photoreflections, reflections is very similar to photorealism, which was a painting technique that was developed in the 60s and the 70s, which shows a lot of reflections. While you're looking into something, you're seeing reflection in a chrome bumper or a window.
Nature changes every moment. The light, the colors, the sky, the land. Do you have to stay many times at the same place to be able to capture the essence of it? Or are you just lucky that you go there and the clouds and the light just show beautifully for you and you take that picture?
Well, this technique of photo reflections requires the right lighting. The sun needs to be shining. As you look into a window, the sun needs to be pointed over your head. You're close to a building, so the sun is not going to be in your lens, because I stand quite close to the glass so that I can see, and a little bit off to the side so that I don't see a reflection of the camera. But the sun is lighting everything behind me, so that's quite bright. So this transparent glass can see that like a mirror because it's so bright behind my camera. So I just adjust the angle of the way I'm looking into the window to put the reflection and what I'm seeing directly through the glass into a pleasing composition. Then I take the picture.
In all your work over the years, what was the most difficult natural scene to present? Because in the book, Bodie, Good Times and Bad, the pictures of people are all historic. You took still photography of buildings without people in them, so you didn't have that concept. But you used to shoot on film, not video. When you're doing films and video, you have people involved. But what natural phenomenon did you find most difficult and most enjoyable to take a picture of?
Strangely enough, it has always been reflections, like reflections in a lake or reflections in water or reflections in a glass.
You've taken pictures all over the western United States. Which place has the most magical experience for you? Is it Mono Lake, which is south of Bodie, and is it the Sierra Nevada mountains? What have you found to really move you the most?
I think that the Sierras are one of the most magical places on earth. High in the mountains, anywhere you go, it's spectacularly beautiful.
I must say I agree with you, because I spent 17 years backpacking, climbing the high peaks in the Sierras, and every turn is a new vision. The rocks, the shapes, the trees, the plants, the animals, all vary constantly, and they're all gorgeous.
Yes, but the most challenging place is Yosemite.
Why?
I have photographed Yosemite so many times, and each time I go up there, I say, okay, my goal is to try and find a new scene that I haven't seen anybody else photograph with different elements in it, and that's the quest that I go after.
It's most difficult because it's been photographed so many times by both professionals and amateurs.
That's correct, yes.
And of course, these pictures are on your website. You also show them and sell them in galleries?
Yes, absolutely. We just had a show last year at the California State Library in Sacramento.
California has so many unique ecosystems, from deserts to mountains, lakes, rivers, oceans, you name it. And you've seen pictures of many different ecosystems. What area is attracting you next?
Oh, gosh, whatever area I'm in. I love sand dunes. I'm working on a big sand dune project. I'm working another book on reflections. I just finished a book on a house that's all glass in Carmel, right on the ocean.
We're not taking a listen to your music, but you actually had some in George Lucas's mega hit film American Graffiti. You've composed and created music for over 40 television and film credits. Are you writing music to help save the environment? environment and help protect the earth?
I'm not writing music at the moment, although I have written many, many songs. I've done 2 albums of my own stuff.
You have produced, and you have been photographer and director of over 80 film and television programs, 300 TV commercials, received 50 International Film Festival honors. What different kinds of environments have you presented as you tell the stories of those films and TV shows?
My first film was in Afghanistan on a farmer and his family in a small village and what happens when his oxen dies and he has to sell himself into debt. I did that film 60 years ago, and I am just out of college. I did a lot of educational films, which I love turning kids on to nature. They were all about nature and foods and where our foods come from. My last project, and one I'm still working on, is a film where I took back the first American prisoners of war into the prison camps of Vietnam. This was 28 years ago, and I'm re-editing that to a much longer film because I have the only footage that exists of the Hanoi Hilton and the other prison camps in North Vietnam with some of the prisoners of war who were there.
And I know that when I visited Saigon and went out to some of the areas where they were fighting and had the trenches that they were living in, it was quite a unique experience to be there and feel that and see that. It must be quite painful for returnees to go to places like that.
Yeah, it was very emotional for them. They thought they had dealt with it all, but when you get there, so many other memories just come right back up into your head, and they were just flooding out of them.
There are so many museums in the world, but one that really moved me to tears was the one in Saigon of photojournalists who took pictures during the Vietnam War and who were killed, and they showed the picture and the photographer. Photography had such an impact on that war,
yes,
and bringing the message to the people, as in fact all photography brings a message to the people, and your message has been to bring nature into our lives when we can't be out in it. You and I both love the Sierra Mountains. They're gorgeous, but what other ecosystems in California, Nevada, Arizona, the western United States that we should be more aware of, enjoy by going out there or looking at your photographs?
I love the mountains and the deserts. I find that in the springtime, the deserts can be absolutely spectacular. I go where there's color, and the changing seasons offer the best opportunities for exciting skies and a way to just capture the vibrancy of life.
The deserts vary, whether or not it's Anza Borrego in Southern California, or the Great Lakes area in Utah, or the Central Valley, the Mono Lake, Owens Valley area, Death Valley. Are you attracted to the human history, the natural history, the landscape, or the wildlife, or a little bit of it all?
It's a bit of it all. I'm very eclectic. I mean, I love being out and photographing polar bears up in Churchill.
In Canada, northern Canada.
Yeah. But mostly I'm in California and the western 7 states. California is probably the gold mine of all possible locations because of the places you mentioned, Anza Borrega and up through even the Mojave and, of course, the Death Valley.
Tell me about some of the animals that you have taken pictures of. Is it just being lucky and capturing them as they cross your path, or do you sit there and wait forever until they show up? And what are you trying to present? The need for us to preserve and protect them and make sure that they're not killed and that they have a habitat to live in?
I search for photographs that show the beauty of animals, because then we will want to see them as positive things in our lives. Animals, you have to be very opportunistic about it. When the animal presents itself, you have to capture it at that very moment, because you may not get anything that good again. On the other hand, maybe you will, but because you don't control that situation as you do in a landscape photograph, because time is on your side. In most cases, you're not measuring things in seconds.
What is the difference in photographing a mammal versus a bird versus an insect versus a reptile? And which ones have you found easiest and which ones have you found most difficult?
The animals that I've found the most difficult are the small animals and birds that take a certain technique to capture them so that you can get terrific pictures with terrific lighting. I like to do underwater photography. That's photographing the fishes is wonderful. I'm protecting the reefs. It's been a great project of mine. I donate pictures to organizations that are trying to save the environment because we all need to do that, I think, as photographers. If we have something that can be of value in helping save the environment, we should do that.
Your book about Bodie, a ghost town high up in the Owens Valley, is about a place that is preserved as a state park. You have used pictures to show us places that are preserved and protected so that we can go out and enjoy and support their protection. But don't we need pictures too of places that haven't been preserved and protected?
Yes, I'm doing photography along the coast of Monterey Bay because that's something that is being protected but needs as much public support as possible.
You live in Carmel, and the monarch butterflies migrate to Carmel and come to Carmel. Are they being preserved and protected there?
The monarch butterfly, their population has dropped off substantially in the last couple of years, and they are not sure exactly why that is. The loss of habitat is described as man expands and builds more, but also not having enough of the milkweed that they depend upon to feed as they travel. We have to find an answer for these things because our whole civilization and mankind itself is dependent upon that.
So many of the pictures that I've seen that you have taken are of large landscapes, large expanses. But the plants are always there and are very colorful, and we have so many rare and endangered plants that need to be protected, need to be in ecosystems that will give them an opportunity to survive. Are you taking more of these kinds of floral pictures?
I try to include the flora in the foreground in a very strong position in the foreground with all of the beauty with the landscape. It's not just the big, it is the small, as you mentioned, that needs to be recognized and for its beauty, because in truth, that draws our eyes and our heart as much as just the big landscape.
Are there any particular flowers or animals that you want us to be particularly concerned about and work to preserve?
The bees, because without bees we can't have any fruit or very little of it because they're pollinated by the bees, and the die-offs that have happened from the pesticides, which we haven't been able to get banned, is really a travesty.
In the landscapes, when it's in an area like Bodie, I don't see the power lines, I don't see the infrastructure that is kind of ugly, whether or not it's the roads, the utility poles. Do you think that we need to try to create more beautiful landscapes and put utilities underground and to make even our cities and rural areas more beautiful?
I think the more you can bury above the wires underground, especially in scenic areas, we should undergo that expense because we are such urban societies now. We live in towns and are surrounded by them, and we don't have enough open spaces and enough virgin spaces for man's soul to be able to fly. Because when you get out and you don't have any wires and you don't have anything, then your spirits are automatically raised, because the natural state of mankind is not to be in cities or in offices. We need that for our own souls and our own survival.
I feel great comfort every time I go out into nature, and when I'm stuck in a building at home, I enjoy looking at your gorgeous pictures. It brings nature into my house. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you, Nancy. It's a great pleasure.
I want to thank you so very much for your beautiful work and sharing it with us. Thank you for being my guest.
Well, thank you, Nancy. It's been a great pleasure, and I love your show.
I have been speaking with Will Furman, president of Will Furman Photography and the photographer for the book Bodie, good times and bad. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.